Very talented actor, writer, and producer. You might know him as Burt Hummel from Glee. As my children do, when they found out that he was going to be on the program, they were so excited and they told me that I have to say hello to him, which I will do right now. Welcome to the program, the great Mike O'Malley. Mike, how are you doing this morning?
Ricky, it's great to be with you. Thank you so much for having me as a guest on your show. I am truly a big fan, as you know, of your sense of humor, your comedy, your perspective on so many things that this country shared as shared cultural experiences in the 70s and 80s and 90s and now. And I'm just really pumped to just be with you, man.
Well, thank you, man. Greetings from Sabrina and Katie, by the way, who said, "Oh my God." I said, "Guys," I said, "Burt Hummel is going to be on the show tomorrow." And they're like, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." They love you. So greetings from them. Mike, there's so many things I want to talk with you about here. I remember the first time that we ever had an interaction. At least I think it was the first direct interaction we ever had. Number of years ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago. I was smoking a joint one night and I was pretty high and I had just seen Sully that week. And I was thinking about how good you were in Sully. And I just randomly thought, you know what? I'm just going to send him a message and tell him that I appreciated him in Sully. And so I did that in a very high state, and you were quite gracious and messaged me back and said, "Well, thank you. I appreciate that." But you were so mean to Sully, Mike. I mean, I'm used to seeing you as the everyman likable guy. I mean, I know you've got range, but that was a performance where I was just like that asshole. How can you not appreciate what this man did?
This is a great period of time for an actor like myself, because if you're an American male of a certain age and weight, you can play a lot of villains in Hollywood movies and television shows. So what's funny about that is that in Sully, I play a character who works for the National Transportation Safety Board. And people are always saying to me, "Why are you so mean to Sully?" And if you go back and you look at the movie, I just basically asked Sully, "Did you have a cocktail or two before you flew the plane? Did you smoke a joint or two before you flew the plane?" And if he had said, "You know what, sir? Yes, I did. I had 3 margaritas in the airport lounge. I smoked a blunt with a couple of the flight attendants," it would have been, "Case solved. We got this figured out. This guy admitted it." But they had to create in that film, for the tension, they had to create an obstacle where people were questioning Tom Hanks, America's most beloved actor, or certainly he was at that time. They wanted to create some kind of an obstacle for him to get over. Did he really tell the truth? And so the skepticism of investigators is a quality that's, they admire in themselves, this trying to tear apart at what really happened, because people are ashamed when they do things that maybe they shouldn't have, or they didn't deliver in the way that they should have. And so that was a great role, but it was rich for me to be able to try to do something where, you weren't playing somebody so likable. By the way, it's easier. Okay. It's easier. You don't have to disguise any of your feelings. You can just be a jerk. It's easier to do that.
No, it was great. I had Jeff Jarrett, the professional wrestler, on a few weeks ago, and he said playing the bad guy is always more fun. But I love the role, though, because as I'm watching the movie, I mean, I've always enjoyed your stuff, and you're just so fucking likable. You know what I mean? You've got one of those faces where it's just like, I like that guy. And then I'm watching the movie and I'm like thinking, oh my God, I want to punch this guy. And I'm thinking, okay, well, that's acting. That's a nice job. So Mike, man, there's so much I want to talk to you about. Let me ask you this real quickly. Your first credit on your Wikipedia page, and it may be your first credit on IMDb as well, is a Law and Order appearance in 1991 where you were New York policeman number one. Now, see, that would be
Yes.
the apex of
Yeah.
my career. If I ever end up in anything and I'm just like, like asshole in the hallway number 2 or whatever, that would be something for me to hang my hat on forever. But obviously, you've had a very distinguished career, but we all start somewhere. What are your memories of being New York policeman number one?
Well, what's great about that little anecdote for me is that, I grew up playing sports, right? I love playing sports. I was not a, superb, great athlete, but I loved it. It was my identity. Baseball, basketball. I loved it. And was not one of these guys who grew up wanting to be an actor. But when I got to college, I had a friend who's like, I'm going to go audition for this thing. Do you want to go check it out? And my aunt was an actress. And so, my parents would, bring us to go see local plays. I said, I'm going to go try out for this thing. And I really kind of stumbled into being an actor. And I enjoyed college at the University of New Hampshire so much that I wasn't really focused so much on my studies when I was there. So I did not know what I was going to do once I got out of college, but I had an opportunity to go study acting in New York because this woman who's a great friend of my aunt, Laura Henry, she was a great acting teacher. She said, come down, try it out. I did. And moving to New York City, when you grow up in New Hampshire, it's like moving to a foreign country. You can't believe the differences and what it's like to, just the environment, everything about it. There's been plenty of movies about it. Oh, look at this, moving to the big city. It was very, very hard to adjust to that, having grown up in not a rural area, but in New Hampshire. So it's pretty much rural, the entire state. And so I get this job a couple of years out of acting school. It was just a few months out of acting school. I got this one line. And I had one line where I said, we're at a mafia burial ground. And it was in, I think, Jersey City. So Lower Manhattan was in the background. I remember the World Trade Center was in the background. And there's this big mafia burial ground. And I had a line where I go, hey, Sarge, we've got a fresh one here. Which means it was a fresh corpse that was just recently buried by the mafia. It's like 2 days before Christmas, 1991. It's the first season of Law and Order, and it's late. It's late on a Friday night, and everybody is there. I had forgotten my glasses, and I didn't want to wear them in the scene. But the second AD or the first AD who's cueing me to say my line, because there's a crane. This is the big, big scene. And the episode is Law and Order Torrents of Greed. And I think it might be Torrents of Greed part 2. And so the first AD is about 100 yards away. And so what happens is he's giving me a cue. I'm supposed to yell the line. And then everyone starts to move forward. But I don't see him. So they have to reset the whole thing again. So I thought, oh my God, I'm going to get fired. The first AD is jumping up and down. He's doing like jumping jacks. I say my line, and then I'm going to pull this guy who's playing a dead guy, and he's playing a dead guy. So he's a real method actor. He's playing dead. He's playing like he's weightless. And there's another background actor, extras they used to call him back in the day. This guy's probably like 70 years old, and he's supposed to help me drag the body out of the grave. And I got a torn rotator cuff, and we're trying to pull this guy out of the grave. He's not helping us. I'm like, the shot is just push with your feet a little bit as you get out of the grave. But anyways, that was my first episode of Law and Order. What's so fun is that when you get a line like you just said, I'm going to play a-hole number 2 in the hallway. We'd love to have you on Heels play that character. What was interesting about it? What was interesting about it is that it was such a big deal. It was a big deal for my family. We had a party. Everyone came over, and I have one line, and yet the line that I have, I'm probably 100 yards away from camera. So.
I love it. I love it. I knew that there was going to be a good story behind that, and it exceeded my expectations, Mike. One other thing I got to say here is I loved you as the doorman on The Good Place. And
Oh,
I
thank
was
you.
surprised to see you were only in 4 episodes. Is
Yeah.
that correct? That didn't seem
Yes.
possible. I tweeted not long ago, Paul Lynn. I always loved Uncle Arthur on Bewitched, and there were like
Yes.
258 episodes of Bewitched, and he was in 10 of them. But I remember him as
He was
being
only
so
in 10.
much more a part of that show. He was only in 10 episodes in the entire run of Bewitched. And so when I saw you were in 4 episodes, it made me think of that because you were one of my, favorite recurring characters in that show.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Ricky. That was a great. You should have Mike Schur on at some point because he's a massive sports fan and I think has a lot of the sort of touchstone memories that we shared. I think what's interesting when you talk about like a show like Bewitched and these shows where when we were growing up, there was nothing else to consume. So we watched the same episodes over and over and over again. I could probably name every single Brady Bunch episode that there was. And the shared monoculture that used to happen in this country was a great thing. And it's a great connecting point for so many people. The thing about The Good Place, it was a show with a lot of heart, which is who Mike Schur is as a writer. He created Parks and Recreation, co-created that. And he's got a new show coming out with Ted Danson. And so, for myself, I'm currently recurring on Abbott Elementary. I play a firefighter in that show. And you always want to work with great people. I'm sure you're a fan of this movie, Midnight Run. Well, one of the best books I've read for young actors. So if there's anybody out there who's listening to your show and is a fan of yours and wants to be an actor, wants to go in show business, there's a great autobiography written by Charles Grodin, who was in Midnight Run. And it's called It Would Be So Nice If You Weren't Here. I don't think it's published anymore, but I think you can find it at used bookstores. But one of the things that he talked about was working with great people who are trying to get things done, working with people who show the initiative to try to do something. And as long as the subject matter doesn't really contrast with, or the overall story doesn't contrast or conflict with your values, then you should do it. And you should also work with people that you think just make great stuff. And so that's one of the reasons I was in The Good Place. I just love those people.
So, Mike, let's talk about our shared love of 70s and 80s culture. You're a big sports fan guy. Let's start there. Who were your favorite athletes growing up? Who your favorite teams? What meant the most to you when you were at that age where I'm still a sports fan now, but when you're young, there's something magical about it?
Yeah, it absolutely. So my mom and dad are from Boston. I was born in Boston, and 1975, Boston Red Sox in the World Series. Lynn is the rookie of the year and the most valuable player. He was the kind of guy who was in center field, would crash into the wall and dive for catches like we all want to do. We all want to have the great catch in the outfield. We all want to have everyone celebrating us when we come back and make a great catch. So I think everybody wanted to be my age anyways. I was 9 years old in 75, wanted to be Freddie Lynn. And, Freddie Lynn, of course, I dressed up at Halloween as Freddie Lynn. I was walking around the neighborhood with long john underwear, a Red Sox t-shirt, a hat, and I didn't have any wristbands, and I really wanted wristbands. And I was looking around the house for what the best thing to be used for wristbands were. I wanted my mom to go to the local sporting goods store. There was nothing like Dick's nowadays, just a little, corner sporting goods store that I wanted to go to. And she's like, we're not going to get wristbands. I don't know what the excuse was. My mom's the best, but we didn't go out and get the wristbands. So, but I needed them to complete my costume. So I went, I'm looking all around the house. I'm looking in my dad's shop in the basement, trying to put some cheesecloth together. That wouldn't stick. And I go into my mom's bathroom and I found these perfect things that I could put around my wrists that were white. And they had an adhesive on there. And I just had to clip off a little bit. And so I go downstairs into the kitchen. Remember, I'm 9. I say, Mom, I found the perfect thing for wristbands. I had taken Stay Free maxi pads, put them around my wrist, cut off the extra piece. Okay. And of course, my mom immediately said, you know what, Mike, your birthday's coming up. We're going to get you those wristbands. And it wasn't until like 5 years later, she's like, can you imagine? Like, the O'Malley kid is out trick-or-treating. So basically, there's no way of hiding these 2 maxi pads that are around my wrist as I'm putting out my trick-or-treat bag to everyone in the neighborhood. This is Ricky. This is a true story. It absolutely, truly happened. But
you were working with what you had.
Exactly. It was that ingenuity that I had. But I remember those days. And of course, I then overdid it when my kids were growing up playing sports. I got them they want to play at the field. They're all shielded up. They got whatever Under Armour, Nike, whatever the right socks are, whatever the right thing was, I got them that. But it was but I had a great time growing up in Nashua. I loved playing Little League sports and Babe Ruth. And we had a very good Babe Ruth all-star team that I was on that almost, won, that we won the state championship, and we almost went to the World Series. We were 1 game away and we lost. But I mean, so I really, it's something that I think one of the things that I connect with when we talk about the 70s and I see all the stuff that you put up there. I think to myself, gosh, I grew up in New Hampshire and I know exactly what he's talking about. I know exactly what this memory is. And sometimes I feel as if my kids, they don't have, or nor will they have, that same sort of shared cultural memories. Watch the same shows, listen to them, have the same toys. Maybe I'm exaggerating it, but it's unbelievable how many times you'll put stuff up on your Twitter handle, and the guys in my fantasy football league, who are all guys I know from college or high school, will be like, "Oh my God, did you check out what he put up today?" It's constantly hitting comedically those things that we think about. And I don't know if you have an army of guys, or gals working with you. It's just, I sent you a message recently. It's just like you just don't fail. It's unbelievable.
Well, you're much too kind, but no, it's just me. I'm always flattered when people think that I have a staff, but every tweet that there's ever been came from me. So I claim the bad ones as well as the good ones.
Well, it's really great to hear that, because just the range, it's sports, it's television, it's movies, it's toys, it's products. It's just the one that you put out there about the little football game the other day. I was like, yeah, man, you put that out there. It's like, if this showed up in my house, I'm unavailable for the next 24 to 36 hours. And I just thought
yes.
about myself with my grandma playing that.
I didn't really realize what I was tapping into. When I started that Twitter account, Mike, I thought I was going to tweet about 70 sports. And I thought that's all I was going to tweet about. People say to me all the time, well, why do you call it that? It's because I didn't realize what I was tapping into. And I think it kind of goes back to that monoculture element where we had 3 shows to choose from in our childhood, really. Maybe you're picking up a couple of fuzzy ones elsewhere, but for the most part, we had very limited options. And so we were just choosing the best of the 3. And I remember I had Nick Bakay on my old podcast, and we were talking about how neither one of us really loved Laverne and Shirley, but we both have seen probably every Laverne and Shirley episode. And it's like, well, why did we watch it? And I believe Nick said we watched it because it was on. And then you went to school the next day and we talked about it.
I would say that, like, what was the guy? I'm sorry, who was the guy's name? I'm the guy from Baba Black Sheep, who got in the argument with Gabe Kaplan at Battle of the Network Stars, and then they were racing Robert each
Conrad.
other. I mean, this was, yeah, Robert Conrad. This, I'm sure you've put this on your handle before, but it is. This was. It was like a game, a walk-off home run that everybody's talking about the next day. There was nobody that missed this race between Gabe Kaplan and Robert Conrad, and the fact that Cotter beat him. It was shocking.
Yeah, people can't comprehend what it meant. And you had Howard Cosell there treating it with this gravitas, that was, it seemed like he really meant it, and when they resuscitated that franchise a few years ago, it didn't work because everybody was a little too glib and a little too cool for it. And, we're kind of almost doing a parody of it, but those people, they wanted to win. There was an earnestness to it. I think one of the things about the 70s and 80s is we hadn't quite yet become too cool for school as a culture. And, there was a sincerity when you saw, Ed Asner in the tug of war. It's like Ed Asner wanted to win that tug of war, God damn it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It meant something to him in a way that I don't think we can relate to culturally in 2024.
No, I don't know, man. There's just too much. There's too much to distract us. Look, I'm not going to say the 70s were the greatest, time in this country or what have you. I mean, but it was, there is something to that shared experience. I think that, is just, like I said, you continue to mine it and it's a lot of fun.
Well, look, thank you, man. Let me ask you here. Favorite TV shows and movies when you were growing up. I mean, what were your can't miss TV shows as a kid? Because we all had them. What's Happening was one of mine. Every week I couldn't miss What's Happening. And as I recall, it ran against half of the Waltons. And so I remember that was a little tough. When we had one TV, I was really testing how much my mom loved me because the Waltons was her thing and I couldn't do it. A half an hour of Richard Thomas was, God bless him, it was all I could handle. I wanted rerun. So what were your shows that you tried not to miss growing up?
Well, so we grew up in a family. There was four of us pretty close together within 5 years. And obviously we watched Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley. We were not allowed to watch Three's Company. That was a little bit too risque for us, Irish Catholic family. But Happy Days, we were really into the Fonz. Obviously, I'm in fifth, sixth, seventh grade. So much so that we would put my brother and I would put the sign with the Fonz with the arrow that went up the stairs that the Fonz had to show that he lived in the garage. We put that. My mom allowed us to tape a sign of that in the hallway. The Fonz lives upstairs, and my brother had painted some. I mean, this is just so ridiculous. The Fonz, that we thought he was the coolest guy. I mean, Henry Winkler is. You should have him on the show. He is the nicest guy. I've met him a couple times in real life. But I mean, the fact that the Fonz was the coolest dude, man, did we think he was the coolest dude. And, I loved $6 Million Man. I loved Steve Austin. I just thought that was the coolest show. We couldn't miss it. We couldn't miss on Friday nights, The Incredible Hulk. Watched all the episodes of The Incredible Hulk, and then we got, look, we didn't really go out much, Love Boat and Fantasy Island. This is what we were watching growing up. Welcome Back, Kotter, obviously, which I mentioned. And then, once I got into, middle school and high school, all the movies that, it would be very interesting to go back and look at some of the scenes in these movies that, especially the R-rated movies of the late 70s and the 80s, and be like, wow, that just could not be made anymore. We could not have this scene. It would never get made. And probably rightfully so.
Yeah. Yeah. There are a lot of those. when you look at it. Some of the stuff in Bad News Bears, even right, Slapshot.
Yeah.
Those kinds of movies, you look at them and they're great for what they are, but they're just not movies that could be produced today. Not in the same way, right? It would be watered down and it just wouldn't be the same thing.
Well, the thing is that we watch. It's funny you say that, because when my kids started playing Little League, we said, let's sit down and watch the Bad News Bears. Like, every 15 minutes you turn and you say, okay, now you can't say that, and that's wrong. You shouldn't say that.
Right.
This is what it's an amazing performance, but you understand, like, and look, the takeaway from that movie is the dad who's just so serious about it. Vic Morrow, may he rest in peace. That he plays that. I mean, that is the takeaway, that Walter Matthau's character turns into somebody who's taking it a little bit too seriously. It's still a great movie, the message of it, but it's kind of hard to explain to your kids, yeah, this is how people used to say things. This is how they'd communicate. I think it's great nowadays that kids are aware of bullies in a way that they weren't, and being sensitive to what comes out of their mouth. But I don't want to say you can't make that kind of a movie nowadays, but I think that what happened in that movie, you have the story of what's happened in the movie does all the telling for you, right? If you're not smart enough to get that Walter Matthau's character, Buttermaker, changes, and that he's got to have some kind of behavior early on in the movie that he realizes he has to change. And I think,
right.
And maybe it was just, a little bit post-Vietnam. It's like people are like, well, we don't have to spoon feed these people anything. They're going to get it. And if they don't get it, then maybe at one point they will. It's interesting, Ricky. I hosted a show on Nickelodeon for a long time called Nickelodeon Guts. It was early on. We just did oral history of it recently. And I did an interview with Sports Illustrated because Nickelodeon was going to show the Super Bowl on Nickelodeon. They were going to have a special or they were going to have a special broadcast. And the reporter asked, well, what would you, what do you say when somebody gets injured or there's a concussion that happens on the show? What are you going to say to, the kids about this? And first off, kids are watching football all the time with their parents, and they're seeing these injuries happen, and you talk to them about it. It was an interesting question to be brought up, as if they don't understand why, that people are already having hard conversations about everything else. I mean, everything else that's going on in this country, little kids have to have conversations about that you wouldn't expect to have conversations about. So, anyways, not to go on a tangent there.
Oh, there's a $6 million man lunchbox, Mike.
Yes,
an old tweet of mine. But
Oscar,
it looks like Harrison and McCartney to me, Mike. So I just went in that direction. But there's the great Oscar Goldman coming up. Look at that left hand on Oscar Goldman. It's about 3 times the size of a normal human hand. He's going to lend Steve Austin some assistance if needed. Although it looks like Colonel Austin is doing just fine there, Mike. That was the best era for lunchbox. What happened to lunchboxes? It was It was a goddamn American art form, Mike.
Lunchboxes were. It was a beautiful. I had what did I have? Did I have a Starsky and Hutch lunchbox? I definitely had a lunchbox, and I'm old enough to remember when there was glass thermoses because I smashed it on the way to school one day. Remember the $6 million episode with Maskatron?
Oh my God! Yes, I do. In fact, because they made the action figure for that too. I think.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Have we done how you must have I must have you must have done GI Joe with the Kung Fu grip. That's the thing everyone wanted. Just GI Joe with the Kung Fu grip.
Oh yeah, I mean that was quintessential. The Evil Knievel, which the commercials
Oh,
always made the
yeah.
Evil Knievel. It was amazing. He would do like two or three flips in the air, land perfectly on the commercial, and then you get him home and I mean set up some Campbell's soup cans, and he'd go like right under the couch or something.
He,
You
he,
know, he
it,
never had great success in my home.
it's like the smashed up derbies. They never
Oh
smashed.
God,
Like,
yes.
think about that toy. That was a toy. That was a toy. Let's let's create a toy where for boys where these two cars are just smashing into each other and getting destroyed.
It was the coolest thing in the world. When I was 5 years old, I saw that commercial, as we did back in the day. You know, my mom wrote down the address, and you had to write it down fast. They'd leave it up there for a while, but we didn't have a VCR in 1975 or 76,
No,
right? And you send off for it, mail in a check, and 6 to 8 weeks later, you're waiting for the mailman to bring it one day. And I remember the day that the Smash Up Derby got there, and I thought it was going to be the greatest day of my life, but it was a little disappointing, as you alluded to. That
it
was an
was very
early
disappointing.
childhood lesson in disappointment.
Well, I sent away for the GI Joe action team, and I ended up. God, I would love to find one of these things. I got to go on eBay and see if there's like a chain, and then it was like a gray plastic, just an A, and that made it was a medallion, but it was like the size of it was like a little bit bigger than a silver dollar, and it just had an A with but the T came on the team. Man, I must have waited. It's so funny, Ricky, that you say that like you wait 6 to 8 weeks. Like now it's like, can we get something? And you check Amazon. We live in Los Angeles. Like, yeah, we can get that at a 4 a.m. delivery tonight. It'll come when we're asleep. We'll wake up and it'll be there. But I really learned how slow time passed when I was a kid waiting for that action team medallion from that I had sent in. Because you had to go and get a money order. You had to go to the post office
Yeah, it
and
was
get
a
a money order.
process.
Yeah, it was a whole thing. God.
And 6 to 8 weeks is so much longer when you're a kid, because it's
Yeah,
a longer part of your life. See, I blink now and like a month has gone by. But when you're a kid, a month feels like it's forever that you're
yeah,
waiting for something to come in
yeah,
the mail.
yeah. That's a good point.
Kids today,
We
it's too
need some
easy for
science.
them.
Yeah, I know. We'll just get something else. Anyways, like you're talking about, like what happened to lunch boxes? The thing is like the DoorDash will deliver the food right here. I'm surprised DoorDash doesn't deliver lunch to my kid's school.
Seriously, I saw Chuck E. Cheese on DoorDash not long ago. And I thought to myself, who is sitting at home wanting pizza? And it's like, you know what? Chuck E. Cheese pizza sounds really good right now. That's just what you eat to try to endure the time that you're investing in your children. I don't know who's ordering it on DoorDash, but apparently someone is because it's out there. But and look, Mike, as you said, I mean, the world's gotten better in a lot of ways, but there are just certain aspects of society that we've lost where, maybe it was good for us to have to wait a little while for our gratification. Maybe it was good for us to have some limited options so that we were kind of exposed to more stuff. Like I remember Hee Haw. My grandparents would have Hee Haw on every weekend, and so I would end up watching it. And it's not something I would have chosen for myself probably, but I ended up appreciating Buck Owens and Roy Clark and some of that corn-fed, homespun humor. I do think that we got exposed to things that were outside of our wheelhouse. I think maybe today it's a little too easy to just isolate yourself with the things that you like the most.
I agree with you on that. It's interesting because, just thinking about growing up in the 70s, how much we rode our bikes, and we rode our bikes everywhere. And it's kind of amazing. I don't know if this happened when in your town when you were growing up. We lived in a neighborhood where a bunch of different kids, they all different bells. So some cowbell meant it was Bobby McLaughlin, and somebody hits a blowhorn and somebody else. And it basically was literally like the moms. It was dinner time to come in. And other people knew it was like, okay, when it gets dark, when the sun goes down, you got to start walking home because you got about 20 minutes. But there was definitely something about that spirit of adventure, riding around, going around on your bike, having to entertain yourselves. Look, it led to some crazy bad crap too, right? I mean, there was a lot of kids running around Nashville, New Hampshire with BB guns, shooting them at things they shouldn't have been. And there was absolutely no supervision. And I don't want to make light of some of the casualties of what happened, to kids getting injured, and because there were some kids who were riding their bike in places they shouldn't have, and got hurt. But I don't know. Now I'm going to sound like an old man yelling at a cloud, and I don't want to.
No. I mean, look at this. Look at that, Mike. For $550 right there in the original packaging.
Oh my God!
So
mask.
It's decision time later for you, Mike. I don't know. You'll have to think about it. Maybe just recreate some $6 Million Man scenarios right there in the comfort of your home.
I tell you, guy.
Mike, before
I gotta yeah.
No, go ahead, Mike.
You got to have Greg Garcia on this show. Greg Garcia, he went to Frostburg State. He's from that area in the DC area, and he created Yes Dear, co-created Yes Dear, created My Name Is Earl, Raising Hope. You'd love this guy, man. You guys would have so many things to talk about. I mean, you really remind me of him. He's you could write on his shows. I mean, he's awesome. You got to meet him. Look at this guy. By the way, so see this bike. There was a kid in my neighborhood who tried to jump. It's so interesting you brought up Evel Knievel, because Evel Knievel even impacted Happy Days, where famously, he jumped the trash cans and then tried to jump the shark. This is because of Evel Knievel. They were all just trying to imitate him. And there was a kid in my neighborhood, just going back to unsupervised play, who tried to jump 7 trash cans. And I know you put a tweet out about that, about the one kid, and he's midair. I think he's midair on his bike or his it's such a great one, or on his big wheel. No, it has to be his bike. And
yes. Yeah, he's on a bike.
And he ended up
I know the one.
Yeah, this kid in my neighborhood ended up in the hospital. That was
Oh. Yeah. I mean, the broken bones and ER visits from misguided Evel Knievel attempts has to be near infinite. Mike, yes. I would think. Look, but before you go here, the time's getting away from me because I'm having so much fun, and you got to promise me you'll come back sometime, and we'll continue this, I'd
love to.
All right. Well, thank you, my friend. Tell me a little bit about Heels here, which I know is a really good show, and I want to make sure my audience is aware of it.
Okay, so Heels, for anyone in your audience who's into professional wrestling, it is a show set in southwestern Georgia at a independent wrestling promotion called the DWL, the Duffy Wrestling. And it's a show about, I don't think it's a show that is really on television much. It's a show set in the South that honors these characters, that honors these guys who love wrestling and why they yearn to be creative, why they yearn to have to be entertainers, but to be entertainers who are putting their bodies on the line because they have to be good on the microphone, but they obviously have to be good wrestlers. And it really is, Ricky, a show. It was created by Michael Waldron, who's just a great writer, and he's got the new show coming out next year on Hulu with Glenn Powell and the Manning brothers about Chad Powers, which is the guy who has to put on a disguise to go play football for a college football team because he's become persona non grata. But, I was the showrunner and I'm an actor on Heels. And what I really love about this show is it shows a slice of life in America you really don't see the behind the scenes of. And that is, what is it like to have this creative yearning, this dream to do this thing? And are the costs of it, worth it? A lot of people say, follow your dreams. And then people do. And then they're looking up at age 35, 40 years old, and they're saying, was it worth it? Who'd I lose? What did it cost me? What did it cost me financially? What did it cost me emotionally? What did it cost me in my relationships? The kids I didn't have, the marriage that failed. So it's fun. There's a lot of action, but it also deals with, I think, a lot of things that, men are striving to deal with, which is, how do I be the great man that I want to be, a man of high character, and yet deal with all of my own humanity and how it gets in the way? So it's on Netflix right now. Our first 2 seasons are on Netflix. The show's called Heels. Heels as in bad guy, not heels as in shoes. And so I think if you understand wrestling, and even if you don't understand wrestling, I think if your viewers and listeners watch this show, they'll understand why people love wrestling so much.
Well said. And it's a great show, and I love wrestling, so it's right in my wheelhouse. Mike, thank you so much. One of my favorite interviews that I've done. My only objection is that we can't tip back a couple of beers and keep talking for about another hour here, because it's so much fun to listen to you, your perspective on all of these things. Let's do it again sometime for sure.
Ricky, I'd love to come back. You are a gracious host. You're so funny. Thanks for the laughs that continue throughout the years now. It's been years now. And I really hope that we connect and I end up being able to come on and be a guest about more often.
Thank you, my friend. Count on it. Appreciate you.
All right.
Have a good one,
All right,
Mike.
thank you.
Hey, OutKick fans on YouTube, if you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button and make your way over to OutKick.com where you can watch the full episode.